Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. All right, welcome in, everybody, to the 240th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns for the Boston Sports Journal and do a weekly Q&A there with the subscribers. So make sure and subscribe to that great site. A lot of great content on all the four major pro sports there. Speaking of great content, we have the Boston Herald, Steve Conroy, with us today to talk about all things Bruins. Steve, thanks for joining us, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe.
You got it anytime. Let's just get into last night right away, Steve. Bruins lose 5-3. Interesting game. Like, obviously not a good first period. Love the fight they showed in the second period to get back into the game. And then they get hit with a gut punch at the start of the third period, self-inflicted mistake, and they went back and scored 2 goals in less than 90 seconds to tie it up. Looked like they were headed for a point, at least in overtime, and kind of able to salvage a point. And then just another self-inflicted wound with about 6 minutes to go. Hampus Lindholm, under no pressure whatsoever, just throws a puck up the boards. Sean Corelli doesn't expect it, kind of handcuffs him, and then that turns into a dumpster fire in the D zone for the Bruins as they're in chaos at that point. Ends up in the back of the net and they lose. Better effort than the last time they were in Ottawa, similar to a lot of the 1-goal losses in the 6-game losing streak where they probably should have gotten a point. And it was, I'm sure, frustrating for them that they didn't at least get the point. But I also think, it looked fatigue related to me. And there's going to be games like that in 82 where guys make mental mistakes and they're not as sharp as they usually are. And when you're playing a team like Ottawa that's got some talent offensively, they're going to be able to make you pay.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of underscores how valuable Hampus Lindholm is. His first lousy game and and they lose.
Yep.
They, that first period looked a lot like the 7-2 game. A couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
They just didn't show up. You give them credit for bouncing back and fighting back, and with Mark Kaslick leading the way, kind of willed themselves back into that game.
Yep.
But that's what happens when you play catch-up hockey. I mean, you eventually finally, for 30 minutes of the game, they're fighting to get back into the game. They finally tied it up, and then all of a sudden there's a little bit of a relax issue there, and they get dinged for a goal with 5 minutes left, and they had no pushback at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Kaslick because I think he absolutely deserves mention. It was notable to me watching the broadcast. They interviewed him between the first and the second period, and how hard he was on himself, how accountable he was just on himself individually, as well as the way the whole team played. And I didn't think he was bad by any means in the first period. But I think the lack of physical and emotional engagement was obvious in that first period. And that's an area where I'm sure he takes a lot of pride in and feels like it's his job to get the team where they need to be emotionally and physically and be sort of one of the bellwethers of those two categories. And then he goes out in the first shift of the second period, blasts Nick Jensen, really physical, energetic first shift. And I think that really changed the tone of that entire second period. And obviously he gets the game tying goal, great second effort goal in the third period. That was, really just work ethic and staying on a puck and not giving up on it until it was in the back of the net. And it underscores for me, that Kostelic is one of the leaders on this team. He's one of those guys that I think takes accountability, will roll up his sleeves and do the dirty work and the hard work when it needs to get done, and will set the example for everybody else. And, how important he is this year to this team, being completely healthy and being able to play the role that he's playing. I think that was his 4th goal last night, and I think maybe he had 5 all of last year. So he's getting close to even surpassing what he did last year, and has been a really effective, good player for this team night in and night out for the first few months of the season.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope he stays healthy. I mean, the style he plays is, is pretty taxing on the body.
Yep.
I'm glad he let Tanner Jeannot take the McDermott fight
Yes.
this time around.
Yes.
And that third line really is kind of an engine for this team. They really set a tone, when they're on their game, and they did in the second period last night. Kastelic, like I said, hope he stays healthy. He's he's kind of a quiet leader. I don't think he's quite a rah-rah guy,
No.
but he says the right things and he means them when he says them.
Most definitely. And I think you need guys like that aren't just necessarily rah-rah guys, but will like do it on the ice and walk the walk as much as they talk the talk. And I think he's one of those kind of guys. Most definitely. You mentioned the Tanner Jeannot fight with McDermott. It's funny. I think Tanner Jeannot's only fought a couple of times this year. He's fought legit heavyweights each time. Mm-hmm. And you notice after he fights, there is an absolute crowd of Bruins players there waiting to give him a stick tap or a fist pound at the penalty box when he goes in there. The first time it happened, I hadn't seen that in a while. So I know there was like 7 or 8 guys there all ready to give him like his props for doing it. And the same thing I saw happening last night on the telecast in Ottawa as he went to the penalty box. There was a ton of guys out there waiting to talk to him. And I like that. And I think that speaks to how important they think his role is to the team when he does that, how much they appreciate it. And also, and I mentioned this last night, I tweeted it, it's kind of illustrates to people that maybe ding the Bruins for the contract they gave that guy, where the value is and what some of the money is going towards paying for is a guy that will legitimately do that job and can go toe-to-toe with those toughest guys in the league and will do it when it's called upon and when it's necessary, and how much that is valued by all the other players on the team because it's such a difficult job and he does it well. And it's interesting also to sort of draw the parallels to the guy they were probably going to give that contract to before they signed Jeannot and before they traded Trent Frederic. I think that kind of a contract was earmarked for a guy like Trent Frederic. But, you look at what he's done in Edmonton. It's been a really quiet, sort of slow start for him. And I think Jeannot has played much better in Boston. So I think it's interesting when you sort of look at the, what could have been versus what is, and the similar money given to both players and, what's working out better for which team.
Yeah. And the key thing with a Tanner Jeannot, you got to be able to play a little bit. Yep. I don't think he's ever going to, go to 24 goals like he did that one year.
No.
But you've seen that he's got a little bit of skill to him. I forget who scored the goal, but he made a terrific pass on a 2-on-1 earlier this season.
Yep.
So he's got more than just the fisticuffs. So he's a pretty good player, and he can play on the third line. He's not just a fourth line guy. So yeah, he's a valuable guy. In the contract, by the time it's over, it's gotta be close to a minimum deal practically. Right. Yes. With the way the cap is going up. So yep. I didn't have a huge problem with the contract.
No, I didn't either. Because I think for all the reasons you mentioned, like a couple more years with the cap going up, it's going to seem like, per diem money that he's getting paid. It's really not going to make into the salary cap and how much is going on. Sure, like it's a 5-year deal.
And it's not like the Bruins were the only team in the hunt for this guy.
100%. And he's also I think while I don't think he's going to get to the 24 goal mark that he had his first year, I agree with you there. If he's healthy, he's going to crack double digits in goals just by crashing the net and getting rebound goals and using his size and strength, which we've already seen him do, which is another real asset to have a guy like that big and strong that will go hard to the net and will clean up loose pucks there. He'll just do that by virtue of even if he doesn't make any plays, which he's definitely capable of doing, and we've seen it, just by virtue of the cleanup around the net for that third line. And when he's out there, he's going to get his share of goals as well. So definitely an asset in all of those ways. And, like I said, I was very curious. I love Trent Frederic. I think he's a great kid. I think he's got his moments as a hockey player. But he was one of those players that I kind of wondered what was going to happen with him and how he was going to do in a different place, given some security, given a pretty good amount of money, how he was going to respond and how he was going to play. He almost felt to me in some ways like a player that felt like he was something different than the role that people wanted him to play. You know what I mean? He felt like, and maybe it goes to being a first round pick, felt like he was a little bit more of a higher end player than probably his skills and what he actually brings to the table and what kind of role he's going to serve on a team is going to dictate. And it's interesting to put that side by side with a guy like Jeannot, who I think was undrafted and basically has had to scratch and claw for everything that he's gotten in his entire career.
Yeah, I don't think that Frederick is a guy who feels entitled to anything. He's popped in a few goals that have been impressive. He showed a one timer. When he was here that we didn't know that he had.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think he's quite as comfortable in his surroundings just yet in Edmonton, even though he was there last year. I found it interesting, after he ended up on the wrong side of the fight with Olivier the other night, that he got Edmonton's version of the Grinder Award, whatever it was.
Yes.
And it seemed to me that McDavid was saying, you're a big part of this team.
Yep.
And trying to send a message there. So, I root for the kid. As you know, Joe, one of the nicest kids to come through here.
100%.
But yeah, he's got to find his way.
Yep. And I think that's probably also, I think you're right about McDavid. That's great leadership. But I also think that's kind of like sending the message like, hey, we appreciate what you do. This is your role and kind of are part of your role. And this is what we need, out of you on this team. And I think that's, it's a good message to send from the leader. And I think it's something that, at a certain point when you're in the league and you've been in a role for a certain amount of time, you just kind of have to do the job or you're not going to be there anymore. Although he's got a contract, so he's not going anywhere. But interesting. That is the toughest customer in the league too. That is the guy that will make you pay if you're not ready to drop the gloves with him. All right.
And Trent has a habit of taking a few shots before he starts throwing himself.
Before he starts getting mad and gets into.
There's some guys that just doesn't work.
No, that is not a good plan of attack. So yeah, a few things going on with the lineup as well. Aspero out, low ride back the last couple of games. We've seen Jeffrey Viel back in the lineup. Alex Steeves has played the last couple of games with Lindholm put on injured reserve. I like Steeves a lot. I like his game, and I liked it in training camp, and I know that the Bruins liked it, and that's why they tried him in some bottom six roles, thinking he could have value in a lot of different ways, even though he was a scorer in the AHL. They can put him in a few different roles at the NHL level, and he can play there, and that brings value to him being on the roster if he can be versatile, play on different lines, play in different positions. But I think what I've noticed most out of him is just a really smart player that makes good decisions. Definitely a responsible two-way player that like hustles back on defense and will back check and will put as much effort into the D zone work that he's doing as he will, neutral zone, offensive zone, but also, has the ability to make plays, can score a goal when given a chance. I liked what I've seen of him. I think he's been a really good fit since he's been in there. And if he keeps playing that way, he's going to be, competing with other guys and potentially pushing them out of the picture if he keeps playing the way he's playing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, Middlestat had shown enough on that second line that he, deserves to get his job back when he's healthy again. But the beauty of Steeves is, the way he plays, you can put him on a fourth line. And he can grind. He understands that. I spoke to him this week, and he says, "Yep, that's what I have to do to stick around." And so, who would be the odd man out in that fourth line mix? Do you want to hang on to a Jeffrey Viel? I think he would get picked up, to be honest with you, if he gets put on waivers.
Yeah, potentially, for sure.
If I'm Toronto, I grab them.
Yep.
Even though they probably need to score more goals, but or do you hang on to John Beecher? If Beecher brings the penalty killing face-off aspect to his game, which is valuable.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at Beecher and thinks he can be more than he's been,
Yeah.
and that can be frustrating. But he does bring something to the table, so that's going to be interesting. I think what they really have to figure out is that third pairing.
Yep.
Lorai and Yoki Hayu has not looked great.
Yoki was
I
a
would not.
really rough game. Like Hampus Lindholm wasn't great last night, but Yoki I thought,
Yeah,
like he has been up and down, and he was not good last night at all.
yeah. I thought that McAvoy had to miss that one game up in Toronto because of a family matter.
Yep.
And I thought when he came back in, I thought Aspero deserved to stay in the lineup, and
Yep.
maybe Yoki Hayu would take a seat.
Yep.
Maybe that happens. Maybe that happens tomorrow night in Montreal. We'll see. But they've got to kind of figure that one out.
Yeah, they do, and I'm sure Marco Sturm's a little hesitant to make big wholesale changes when they're in the middle of a heater, like they were. But he did get Lorai back in the lineup, obviously. But yeah, I think that could definitely be called for after the game that Yoki had last night up in Ottawa. Him, sitting for a game and then Aspero going back in, because I totally agree with you that it was tough to take Aspero out of the lineup and put Lorai back in. You kind of had to do it, but it was absolutely nothing that Aspero did to get taken out of the lineup. I thought he played extremely well and very solid hockey, and he's another one like Steeves that I think is acquitting himself to the point where you start to wonder if he can expand his role and if he could be like somebody that could be a regular contributor and sort of carve out a niche with themselves. A lot of people have sort of compared him to Witherspoon in a lot of ways, both in terms of sort of like being a diamond in the rough that they found in another organization that they gave a shot, but also a guy that could be like a 6'7" defenseman and really do the job and do it well for short money. I actually I think in training camp and during the season, I noticed Aspero more playing physical, finishing off plays defensively, like doing the little things really well, more than Witherspoon, even when he was here, to the point where like you'd like to see him stay in the lineup. But I agree, it's going to be interesting to see how that's all going to factor in. While you're talking about the defenseman, any thoughts on that, Stephen? Also, what have you thought of Lorai in the last couple of games since he's come back in?
He's been okay. He was really good, obviously, his first game back.
Yep.
Last couple of games, haven't been great. But first game was with Aspero. The last two games have been with Yoki Hayu.
Yep.
So I would, like I said, I would go back with Aspero again with Lorai. I'm sure there's a little bit of a deference to a guy who just signed a 3-year deal in Yoki Hayu, and coaches tend to defer also to a left-right combination. But Aspero seemed perfectly comfortable on the right side. So yes, I'd like to see that again. Whether we see it or not, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I now could be the time to make changes, especially going into Montreal and playing a team that is surprisingly on top of the Atlantic Division and has been playing, for the most part, pretty good hockey. So that should be a really good matchup. And it'll just be nice, Steve, to have both the Montreal Canadiens and the Bruins in a playoff picture actually playing a regular season game where there might be like a dust up here or there. The rivalry might kick it up a notch. That will be nice to see if something happens in that game that can spark a rivalry that's been pretty close to dead for a while now because either one or the other team's been irrelevant.
Yeah. It's dormant. It's never dead.
Dormant, yes.
I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's game. I don't travel as much as I used to, and for the most part, I don't miss it. But games like tomorrow night is when I do miss it.
Yep,
it's going to be interesting. Montreal just got absolutely waxed last night by Dallas. So you figured, the Bruins will, they'll have their Montreal's attention, no question about it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and you would expect for both teams there is not going to be a repeat of the Bruins' first period from last night in Ottawa going into that game. They should both be highly motivated going into that game, given where the teams are and given the games that they just recently played. All right, let's take a break in the action right now to talk about our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. PrizePicks also offers injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks won't count it as a loss. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on PrizePicks. They also offer Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Our picks for this week are Connor McDavid, more than 0.5 goals. Jack Hughes, less than 1.5 goals. And Connor Bedard, more than 0.5 points. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. I also want to let you know that you're listening to the Pucks with Haggs podcast on the CLNS network, and we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, the NBA History Channel, Patriots Press Pass, and Bruins Rinkside YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right, Steve, your thoughts on the choice of the Bruins to bring up Steeves instead of a number of other players down in Providence who they're off to a great start. Fabian Lysel's playing the best hockey of his career. Merkulov has been good. Patra's put up decent numbers. Blumel's been pretty good. Like Riley Tufte, I think, has been excellent. There's been a lot of different players down there that probably made a good argument or could have made a good argument for being the one to be called up when it was Steeves instead. And I think I understand the thinking behind it. I think it's been backed up by the way Steeves has played since he's been up here. But sort of your thoughts on the decision to go with Steeves and sort of the situation that's going on in Providence right now, where I'm sure there is a number of guys that are watching all the Bruins games down there and following it very closely because they feel like they're putting together a resume to be called up as well.
Yeah, Lysel, he's still getting the occasional benching.
Yep.
He flashes his skill, and he scores these goals at 3-on-3 in overtime, and they're great.
Yep.
But you don't play much of the game on 3-on-3.
No.
But he's played well. Like I said, he's been benched a couple of times this year, so I'm not surprised he wasn't the guy that got the call. Steeves, I thought he was okay in training camp. He himself admitted, he had that first game against Washington in preseason where he's -3. He got stoned on a breakaway. He didn't capitalize on his opportunities in training camp, and basically he didn't have an argument for being sent down. But he played well up there. He fits the mold of a player that the Bruins are looking for.
Yep.
In that he's physical. He finishes his checks. He's in on the forecheck. He's a smart player. So I have no problem with him being the guy. Patra, and we've said this before, when he comes up the next time, you want it to be for good.
Yeah.
And, this is basically an injury call up. And who knows, and Steeves may earn a spot up here, permanently, but it looked like a stopgap measure. Where Patra is going to play, if they still believe that he's a centerman, we'll see. He hasn't had a lot of points down there.
Yep.
Riley Tufte has had a lot of points. Merkulov has had a lot of points. My gut tells me that management has kind of decided that they're, AHL players.
Yep.
Which is unfortunate for them. Maybe they go to a different organization and they get over that hump. But that's my gut on those guys.
Yep.
But Steeves has proven them right so far.
Yeah, he has, and that kind of sort of ends the discussion when he's played as well as he has. And like you're right about Patra, and I also think like if they were going to put Steeves in like the third line sort of situation, they definitely, I don't think the way the third line is playing, that's not something they're going to drop Matt Patra into. I think they want him to be in more of a sort of skill situation the next time he comes up if he's going to get put into that. But I also think like it's always going to lend itself more to guys like Steve's getting more looks or more call-ups because of the way that he plays, because he's willing or because he has the ability to play in more of a fourth or a third line role to establish himself, and then he has the skills to also play higher in the lineup. I think he's going to get more looks. Like there are complaints sometimes from Bruins fans that certain prospects don't get extended looks, and part of it is just the makeup of them as a player and their inability to play in different roles or on different lines where you're just not going to get anything out of them. It's not going to be a situation where it's going to be best for them or best for the team versus guys like Steeves, who I think can excel in a lot of different areas. You're never going to see Fabian Lysell brought up if there's a chance he's going to be like a fourth line wing that's going to play 8 minutes a night.
No,
it just doesn't make sense.
No. In Patra, I have belief in that kid that he's going to be an NHL player.
Me too.
But let's not forget, he had a really rough preseason. He was really struggling with the system change. I think it was -6 in his first 2 games.
Yep.
So I have no problem with him incubating for a little bit longer.
Yes, incubating, marinating. Choose any verb you want for what they're doing down in the EHL. Leave them there a little bit longer before they're ready to come back. I think that's a great observation on your part. Your thoughts on David Pastrnak scoring his 400th goal? The on-ice celebration.
The outrage of the on-ice celebration.
Oh, the traditional Toronto media was not happy with that one. I guess it's 500 goals or more that you stop the game and have a celebration. You can't do it for 400 goals, apparently. But if Austin Matthews did something like that, I think it would be okay with them.
Yeah. I was surprised that they came out for that goal. Pastrnak was surprised that they came out for that goal.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I don't mind them, hanging on to, grabbing anything positive.
Yes.
After what, they went through last year.
Yes.
They don't want a repeat of this. And, the togetherness is very promising. Like when Hampus Lindholm got, basically got the bad end of a cheap shot from Bobby McMahon the other night.
Yep.
Who jumps in? Who's the first to jump in? It was Marat Husnadinov.
Yep.
And that's a good sign for the esprit de corps of this team.
I agree. And there was several times when stuff like that happened. Somebody, I forget who it was, got hit into the open door too earlier in that game, and somebody came right over and was in a Leafs player's face about it as well. And what I liked and what I'm okay with in that situation is the Bruins are not a team, it looks like this year, where they're going to look around for anybody's permission to go out there and celebrate. They're like, screw this. We're going out there and we're going to celebrate this. We like pasta. 400 goals is a big accomplishment. We're going to do what we feel like doing. And if you're offended, too bad for you. Like, I love that, more of that attitude and that kind of swagger and not really caring about what everybody else thinks about them from this Bruins team, where they're not waiting for somebody to tell them to do stuff. They're going out and doing it and being much more proactive about it. And I think that's the way to be.
What's Matthew Tkachuk said last after they won the cup? We apologize to absolutely no one.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good attitude to have.
I think so too. So you were talking about wanting to be up in Montreal and not being on the road as much. So that's one of the ones that you miss. And I totally hear what you're saying and feel the same way. For me, it was more the Toronto last weekend and the Hall of Fame stuff going on with such a Boston flavor. Zdeno Chara being inducted, Jack Parker, Jumbo Joe, which I loved what he had to say about Boston. It was really hard to help. You could tell he still has a real soft spot for his time with the Bruins and the way he was treated as like basically a teenage kid when he was there. Just your thoughts on the Hall of Fame inductions by everybody, and obviously everybody that you covered whether it was Big Z or Jumbo, and Jack Parker too with college hockey games. Just a fantastic induction class and such a great Boston flavor to everybody that went in.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was great to see Jack Parker go in. Um, I'm surprised it's taken this long after Jerry York was inducted.
Yep.
But he's there now, and he's able to enjoy it himself. So that was great to see. Chara, there's a debate as to where he fits in the pantheon of great defensemen.
Yep.
But what you can say about Chara, he's one of one. He's a unique specimen. He may not be the greatest defenseman of all time, or in that argument with a Bobby Orr or a Ray Bourque or those guys.
Yep.
But when you're talking about defensive defensemen, he's right up there.
And it's fitting pantheon too, for like the Bruins are kind of iconically known for their great defensemen, right? Like first and foremost.
Yeah.
And he is a fitting next person in the line of the great defensemen that the Bruins have had over the years. And I also think while he's, you're never going to say Zdeno Chara is a better defenseman than Bobby Orr, like as far as being a legend, Hall of Famer, like changed the game, like all that stuff. But I mean, the one thing you can say about Zdeno Chara, one of the best leaders the Bruins have ever had, one of the best captains the Bruins have ever had, from a standpoint of leading a group of men, of motivating, of challenging his teammates to be at the standard that he was at or close to it, holding everybody to the standard that he was at, but also like everybody's equal in the room and people being treated well, and like the first class individual that he was too, as far as that, and Patrice Bergeron. And that permeating through the room and everybody sort of following in line with the example that they set. And also the other thing I would say is like definitely best defenseman of his generation. I would also say the best free agent signing of all time in NHL history.
Oh, absolutely. I've written that many times.
The impact that he's had on the game and the impact he had on the Bruins after coming here was immense, and it was backed up and then some. Like that's the biggest bargain free agent and the biggest impact free agent of all time.
Yeah, and you know what, the organization owes him a debt of gratitude, because he picked them, and
Yep.
if he didn't pick them, and they were in a bad spot at that point, they drove the bus on the lockout, and there were a lot of free agents who really didn't have the Bruins high on their list.
Yep.
Coming out of the lockout, and he picked the Bruins, and he brought back a culture that was dormant, and updated it to the 21st century, and he is one of the most important players in the history of this organization, an organization that has many Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and a storied history. Two uses of dormant in this same podcast, Steve. Very, very impressive usage of that word today. A lot of people are calling the Bruins streaky because they won a few in a row to start the year. They had a 6-game losing streak. They had a 7-game winning streak. I don't feel like this team is going to be streaky going forward. I feel like there were reasons behind the streaks that they had as they were sort of figuring things out early in the season. There may be a little bit of a lesser streaky element to this team moving forward, but I don't see them having these wild swings back and forth like we saw earlier in the season, because I think they've kind of started to lock things down defensively. They're getting pretty consistently good goaltending, and I think those are going to keep them out of extended losing streaks. And as long as they continue to score at the level that they've been at, and I expect there to be valleys there with the scoring. I think they're going to probably go through stretches where 5-on-5, they're going to have a hard time. But it looks like the power play is going to be very productive for them and has been very impressive all year. I don't see this being a team that's going to go into extended losing streaks the rest of the year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that streakiness label is going to kind of go by the wayside at some point.
Well, if they can avoid a long losing streak over the next couple of weeks, they probably won't be a streaky team, because this is a really tough stretch that they're on. They've got, the Montreal on Saturday night, come home, for one game to play Carolina.
Yep.
And then they go on the road to play, 3 games against the 3 California teams that are pretty tough to play.
Yep.
So this is going to be a telling couple of weeks here for them. I would agree that even though they lost last night, they looked a lot different from the team that we saw on the 6-game losing streak, where they really did not know what they were doing. They weren't sure of the system. There were guys roaming in the slot and 3 defenders in the corner.
Yep.
So we've put that element to rest, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, it seems like every game is basically a 1-goal game, in the third period. So they don't have a large margin for error.
Yep.
So it's going to be a battle every night, no matter who they're playing. But yeah, I don't see it's another 6-game losing streak.
No, I don't either. And like last night, for me, those are both mental mistakes that end up really hurting them in the third period. That bad line change where guys are coming off the ice in a situation where the puck was not even close to deep enough for them to be coming off the ice, and it just left them in a vulnerable spot. And the Hampus Lindholm play was just a super unforced, just bad play. 0-4 got coming his way, and he just kind of throws it up the boards when Corrali's not even expecting it. Those are mental errors. Those are not like coverage mistakes. Those are not system mistakes. Those are just players that look to me like they were either fatigued from the general, playing every other day, the amount that they've been playing lately, or like the amount of expended energy just to come back in that game after they didn't have a good first period, whatever it was. It looked like fatigue sort of mental errors to me, where guys weren't as sharp as they should be mentally and sort of focused on what they were doing. And that's kind of was their undoing. And that's not something we've seen consistently. And that definitely has nothing to do with figuring out the system that they're playing and the coverage that they're playing and all that other, stuff that we saw earlier in the year. So I totally agree with you on that. And that's why I kind of last night after the game was over, did not have the same feeling like they, like some of the mistakes that we saw during the losing streak. So you feel a little more confident that you're not going to see that kind of stuff on a consistent basis where they're just going to really make it easy for the opponents to beat them. Ottawa had to fight for that game last night. They took advantage of some Bruins errors, but they made them pay a price to get it by the way they played in the second and the third period. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Definitely
a tough stretch coming for the Boston Bruins. Steve Conroy, thank you very much for joining us. Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. This podcast is a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Steve Conroy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. So long, folks.
Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.